When we think of cinema, we don't always think of foreign directors. This is probably due to the popularity of Hollywood and the big blockbusters that it creates every year. American cinema being as good as it is, there's actually a whole world out there and many directors that have movies that are really worth watching. Being born in Belgium, I had the privilege of discovering Jean-Pierre Jeunet at the movie theaters with the film Le Fabuleux Destin d'Amélie Poulain back in 2001. From that moment on, I became an enormous fan of Jeunet and have made it a point to watch all of his movies. The thing that's so amazing about his work is that he has an enormous ability to mix elements of fantasy, realism, and science fiction, either to create idealized realities or to give relevance to mundane situations. A former animator, his movies are marked by quirky slapstick humor alongside surrealist visuals. And being such a creative person, it's no wonder he has come to be regarded as one of the most influential and important directors in modern French cinema, even earning him 2 Academy Award nominations. In this video, I'm going to explore his directed movies and look back at Jean-Pierre Jeunet's humble beginnings until his most current project. So, without any further ado, who is Jean-Pierre Jeunet? Jean-Pierre Jeunet was born on September 3, 1953 in Coteau, France. Prior to his career in cinema, he worked as a technician at France Telecom in Nancy. He started his career in directing by making advertisements and music videos including La Fille au Nylon by Julien Clerc, which was released in 1984, or Tombé pour la France by Etienne Dao, released in 1986. At the same time, he was also working with Marc Caro, a designer and comic book artist who became his longtime collaborator and co-director. They met at an animation festival in Annecy in the 1970s. Together, Jeunet and Caro directed award-winning animations. Their first live-action film was Le Bunker de la Dernière Rafale, or in English, The Bunker of the Last Gunshots, released in 1981. The short is about soldiers in a bleak futuristic world and already shows a glimpse of the marvelous worlds that Jeunet is able to portray in his films. One thing to note about Jeunet's films is that they often resonate with the late 20th century French film movement, cinéma du look, and allude to the themes and aesthetics involving German Expressionism, French poetic realism, and the French New Wave. All Caro's and Jeunet's short films won awards at numerous festivals, both in France and abroad. One of the more known music videos that Jeunet directed together with Caro is Jean-Michel Jarre's Zuluk. The movie that really propulsed Jeunet and Caro into the media spotlight was actually the movie Delicatessen, which was released in 1991. This movie is a black comedy film where most of the action takes place in a dilapidated apartment building in post-apocalyptic France. Food is in short supply and grain is used as currency. On the ground floor is a delicatessen butcher shop run by the landlord Clapet, who posts job opportunities in the Hard Times paper to lure victims to the building, whom he murders and butchers as a cheap source of meat to sell to his tenants. Because of that, the building is in constant need of a new handyman and therefore hires a new disposable worker, Louison, a former circus clown, desperate for work and lodging. Unfortunately, this time, Clapet's plan of killing the handyman hits a snag when his young daughter falls head over heels for the lovable Louison. This movie was well received at the box office and was nominated for several important European awards. As mentioned, Delicatessen made Jeunet and Caro popular in French cinema, but they had to wait till 1995 until they were able to release their next feature film, La Cité des Enfants Perdus, or in English, The City of Lost Children, which is a dark, multi-layered fantasy film which proceeds to tell a story in full awareness that the past to which it is committed never really existed, making this movie a perfect example of the steampunk genre. This movie tells a story of old and decrepit Crank, a highly intelligent but malicious being created by a vanished scientist who is unable to dream, which causes him to age prematurely. At his lair on an abandoned oil rig, which he shares with the scientist's other creations, 6 children clones, a dwarf named Martha and a brain in a vat named Irvin, he uses a dream extracting machine to steal dreams from children. The children are kidnapped for him from a nearby port city by a cyborg cult called the Cyclops, who in exchange for the children are supplied with mechanical eyes and ears. Among the kidnapped is Denré, the adopted little brother of Carnival Strongman 1. The boy's father, 1, the hulking strongman of a traveling circus, and his precocious 9-year-old friend Maquette joined forces to defeat Crank's minions in order to save Denré. According to many articles analyzing the film, the dual nature of capitalism constitutes a main source of tension in La Cité des Enfants Perdus. On the one hand, capitalism is represented as enabling self-interest and freedom. On the other hand, it exposes the ill effects of capitalism, the exploitation of childhood, of tenderness, attacked and turned out by his own beloved creations, and of innocence, while suggesting that there is no place in capitalism for originality, self-reflective analysis, and other defining aspects of the human. The success of The City of Lost Children, with its interesting visual styles, led Jeunet to an invitation to direct Alien Resurrection, which was released in 1997. Jeunet had just completed the script to Amelie and was surprised he was offered the job for Alien Resurrection, as he thought the franchise had finished with Alien 3 and believed that making a sequel was a bad idea. Jeunet, however, accepted the project with a budget of $70 million and even required an interpreter, as he did not speak much English when filming began. In this episode of the Alien saga, we find ourselves 200 years after Ripley sacrificed herself for the sake of humanity. Her former employer is long gone. This time it is the military that resurrect the one-woman killing machine through genetic cloning to extract the alien xenomorphs from within her. But during the process, her DNA is fused with the Queen. A group of mercenaries arrive at Oregon on their ship Betty. They deliver several kidnapped humans in status, but by doing so, various aliens bred from the hijacked crew escape. The thing is, the military scientists were using the humans as hosts for the aliens, raising several adult xenomorphs for study. At that moment, the Betty crew soon encounter Ripley 8. Recognizing her name, they try to kill her, suspecting that Ripley 8 may be used to create more xenomorphs, but the creatures have already been cloned. When the Auriga is set on automatic pilot back to Earth, it's up to Ripley and the smugglers to stop the Auriga and escape with their lives. The film grossed $47.8 million in North America, which made it the least successful of the Alien series on that continent. However, it was well received internationally, with a gross of $113.6 million, bringing its total gross to $161.4 million worldwide. In 2001, Jean-Pierre Jeunet released undoubtedly my favorite project of his, Le Fabuleux Destin d'Amélie Poulain, known in English-speaking countries as Amélie. The film is a whimsical depiction of contemporary Parisian life set in Montmartre. This movie follows Amélie Poulain, who was born in June 1974 and brought up by eccentric parents who, incorrectly believing that she has a heart defect, decide to homeschool her. To cope with her loneliness, Amélie develops an active imagination and a mischievous personality. On August 31, 1997, startled by the news of the death of Diana, Princess of Wales, Amélie drops a plastic perfume stopper, which dislodges a wall tile and accidentally reveals an old metal box of childhood memorabilia hidden by a boy who lived in her apartment decades earlier. Amélie resolves to track down the boy and returns the box to him. She promises herself that if it makes him happy, she will devote her life to bringing happiness to others. So Amélie secretly starts executing complex schemes that affect the lives of those around her. Mr. Dufayel, one of her neighbors who has a medical condition making his bones as fragile as glass, having observed Amélie, begins a conversation with her about his painting. Although he has copied the same painting 20 times, he has never quite captured the look of the girl drinking a glass of water. They discuss the meaning of his character, and over several conversations, Amélie begins projecting her loneliness onto the image. Dufayel recognizes this and uses the girl in the painting to push Amélie to examine her attraction to a quirky young man named Nino Quincampoix, who collects the discarded photographs of strangers from passport photo booths. Amélie was a huge critical and commercial success worldwide and was nominated for several Academy Awards. For his work on the film, Jeunet won a European Film Award for Best Director. In 2004, Jeunet released Un long dimanche de fiançailles, or in English, A Very Long Engagement, which was filmed entirely in France over an 18-month period with about 30 French actors, approximately 500 French technicians, and more than 2,000 French extras. For this movie, he recast Audrey Tautou from Amélie, along with many other familiar faces from his previous movies. Actually, that is something of note with Jean-Pierre Jeunet, is that he often casts the same actors, and most notably Dominique Pinon, who has been present in his movies as far as his short films. A Very Long Engagement was based on the 1991 novel of the same name by Sébastien Japrisot. In this movie, 5 French soldiers are convicted of self-mutilation in order to escape military service during World War I. They are condemned to face near certain death in the no man's land between the French and German trench lines. It appears that all of them were killed in a subsequent battle, but Mathilde, the fiancée of one of the soldiers, refuses to give up hope and begins to uncover clues as to what actually took place on the battlefield. She's all the while driven by the constant reminder of what her fiancé had carved into one of the bells of the church near their home. Along the way, she discovers the brutally corrupt system used by the French government to deal with those who tried to escape the front. She also discovers the stories of other men who were sentenced to the no man's land as a punishment. She, with the help of a private investigator, attempts to find out what happened to her fiancé. The story is told both from the point of view of the fiancé in Paris and the French countryside, mostly Brittany, of the 1920s, and through flashbacks to the battlefield. In 2009, he released Micmac, which is called Micmac à tire-larigot in French, meaning Micmac's non-stop shenanigans. This film is billed as a satire on the world armed trade. Jean-Pierre Jeunet originally wrote the character of Basile for Jamel Debbouze, who also acted in his movie Amelie as the character of Lucien, who is a simple but super kind-hearted grocer's assistant. Unfortunately, Debbouze left the project after 3 weeks, citing artistic and financial disagreements. The role was later given to Danny Boone. In order to do research for the film, Jeunet toured arms manufacturing plants in Belgium. Some dialogue was taken directly from interviews from arms dealers. The sabotaged machine in De Fenouillet's factory was modeled exactly after an actual machine in the plant which Jeunet visited. This movie follows an avid movie watcher and video store clerk named Basile, who has had his life all but ruined by weapons of war. His father was killed by a landmine in Morocco, and one fateful night a stray bullet from a nearby shootout embeds itself in his skull, leaving him on the verge of instantaneous death. Losing his job in his home, Basile wanders the streets until he meets Slammer, a pardoned convict who introduces him to a band of eccentric junkyard dealers including Calculator, a math expert and statistician, Buster, a record holder in human cannonball feats, Tiny Pete, an artistic craftsman of automatons, and Elastic Girl, a sassy contortionist. When chance reveals to Basil the two weapons manufacturers responsible for building the instruments of his destruction, he constructs a complex scheme for revenge that his newfound family is all too happy to help set in motion. Though the film contains no obvious special effects sequences, digital color manipulation is used throughout, and specific digital manipulations were used on about 350 shots. These manipulations often involve removing people and objects and backgrounds of scenes shot on Paris streets. In 2013, Jeunet released The Young and Prodigious T.S. Spivott, a Franco-Italian movie which is an adaptation of Rafe Larson's book, The Selected Works of T.S. Spivott. This movie follows T.S. Spivott, who is a 10-year-old prodigy with a passion for cartography and scientific inventions. He lives on a ranch in Montana with his parents, his father a cowboy born 100 years too late, and his 16-year-old sister who dreams of becoming Miss America. His twin brother Leighton died in an accident involving a firearm in the family barn, which no one ever speaks of. T.S. was with him measuring the scale of the gunshot for an experiment, and he doesn't understand what happened. One day, T.S. receives an unexpected call from the Smithsonian Institution telling him that he is the winner of the very prestigious Baird Prize for his invention of a perpetual motion machine, that he is invited to a reception in his honor where he is expected to give a speech. Without telling anyone, he sets out on a freight train across the United States to reach Washington, D.C. During his journey, he meets a hobo in the train yards of the Midwest, outruns or outwits a number of railroad security guards, and then is picked up hitchhiking by an 18-wheeler truck who lets him off at the Smithsonian in Washington, where he meets G.H. Gibson, who takes charge of him. He ultimately gives his speech for the Baird Prize to a room full of well-dressed guests and discusses the death of his brother. At the 39th César Awards, the film won the award for Best Cinematography. In 2015, he directed a pilot for Amazon Studios entitled Casanova, which follows the story of Giacomo Casanova, who was exiled from his beloved Venice, flees to Paris at the dawn of the Enlightenment in hopes of putting his reputation as a playboy behind him. But his old habits die hard, and temptation is everywhere as Casanova finds a wealth of new opportunity and trouble. The pilot is visually stunning, particularly in its early scenes of Venice, but also in its shots of Versailles gardens and Parisian streets. In the pilot, we meet conniving ministers, scheming Freemason Kabbalists, and a poor virginal whore who gets accidentally traded away to a deviant, cruel nobleman. Best of all is Casanova's antagonistic Madame de Pompadour, the king's mistress, a real historical figure who is today remembered for the stunning portraits she commissioned. Unfortunately, the pilot was put on Amazon Prime for viewing, but it didn't garner enough interest and the rest of the season was never commissioned. Since his last release, Jean-Pierre Jeunet has tried to get other projects funded, but has found it practically impossible to find investors willing to take a risk on his quirky films. He did state in 2019 that Netflix did greenlight his new film called Big Bug, which focuses on robots and artificial intelligence. I personally find it crazy that such a cinematic genius has had a hard time finding people wanting to produce his films. His movies are, after all, a perfect mix of elements of fantasy, realism, and science fiction blended all into one in order to create idealized realities or to give relevance to mundane situations. Just a quirky slapstick humor alongside surrealist visuals of all his films, releases seem to me like enough to garner enough curiosity from any film aficionado. Even though his films are few and far in between, at least I'm glad that he seems to eventually come out with a new project every couple of years. I really hope that you guys enjoyed watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe and hit the like button. Let me know what your favorite Jean-Pierre Jeunet project is. Have a great day, and I'll see you guys in the next video.